Good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Barson, your host for this morning's AutoTalk session. Thank you for joining us. AutoTalk programming is held every third Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern. If after this morning's program you feel additional folks at your organization or store would benefit from this morning's program, please have them join us for the 4 p.m. session this afternoon. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have Ben Brown, Vice President, Regional Sales for Wells Fargo Merchant Services, and Lily Page, Vice President, Wholesale E-Receivables for Wells Fargo Merchant Services. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ben. Ben?
Thanks for the introduction. Good morning and welcome to all the AI88 members and guests on the call. So today we're going to be presenting on information security in new card processing technologies with a goal of helping you to understand better the changes that are coming and what you need to do to be prepared for liability shift, which is coming later this year. So we believe, or we at least hope, this will be valuable and timely information for your business. And we do have, we're going to be on about 17 or 18 more minutes, so if you'll just sit back and relax, we're going to go through the information pretty quickly to leave time for you to ask any questions that you have. Lily Page will be presenting here in just a few minutes, the first of our 3 layers of security. She'll go through a couple of slides, and then I'll wrap everything up, and then we can ask questions after that. So let's go ahead and dive right in. We're really just around the corner from a new era in payment processing. Some of you may remember, if you've been in business long enough, the old paper imprinters, which we used to call Knuckle Busters, and that shift from the paper imprinters to electronic terminals. We're again at a point where the landscape at the point of sale is going to look very different later this year. And as with most new technologies, there are great benefits coming, but we also realize there's going to be growing pains as well. We're really here to help you understand how to navigate those changes, and we want to stand with you as those changes take place. We know there's a lot of misinformation out there, so we want to bring clarity to the changes today, and we want to help you mitigate the challenges that are going to come as the industry moves to chip technology. So Lily, why don't you go ahead and start us off here?
Sure. So to Ben's point, there are 3 layers of security that everyone's going to become familiar with on this call today, if you're not already familiar. We're going to talk about EMV, which stands for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa, and that's known as chip and PIN or chip and signature technology. We're going to cover encryption and tokenization, and we're also going to discuss PCI compliance. So Ben has a few more slides on EMV and encryption and tokenization, so let me take a few minutes to talk about PCI compliance, which means payment card industry compliance. So the card networks actually created the PCI Compliance Security Council in 2006. And the reason that they created this was actually to have an industry standard for credit card payment acceptance. And so we've got some numbers here for you to take a look at. Over 1 billion data records were stolen from 1,500 hacking incidences last year. 1 billion. I don't know about you, but if anybody shopped at Target, if anybody shopped at Home Depot, you probably got issued a new credit card. I certainly did. Over 55% of data breaches are targeted on point-of-sale systems. And there's actually 64% of breaches that go undetected for months, where you wouldn't know until a cardholder realizes that or you get notified by your issuing bank. And then less than 4% of compromised data was even partially encrypted. So this is where we're going to focus on encryption and tokenization. So how can you improve data security with PCI compliance? What you can do is validate compliance as a business as usual type of practice. Make sure that you have PCI compliance policies, procedures, and technology in place today. And then Wells Fargo Merchant Services provides security webinars, PCI webinars, and actually a complimentary TrustWave compliance program to help you all validate compliance free of charge.
Thank you, Lily. I appreciate that. The second layer of security is tokenization and encryption. So Wells Fargo uses a system called TransArmor to tokenize and encrypt transactions while the card information sits at the point of sale or while it travels over the network. The card information is then converted into a cryptogram while the information is passing through the network, and it also stores the information using a randomly generated token instead of the actual personal card information. This greatly heightens the information security and makes it much harder for hackers to steal card information. As you might have noticed from the previous slide, most of the information security breaches did not have any encryption. This technology, if it would have been implemented, could have kept many of those information security breaches you've heard about in the news from happening at all, or at least at minimum, it would have reduced the data that was stolen. So the next is chip technology, and this is the third layer of security, and it's really the big change coming. We'll talk in a minute around why it's so effective in protecting card information, but I first want to talk about why the change is coming and why it took so long. Today, if a customer walks into your dealership and they've stolen someone's card information and they use it at your business, you're not liable for that transaction. The business happens, and in most cases, you're not even aware it's a counterfeit card transaction. So the rightful owner of that card notices that a fraud transaction happened. They see it on their credit card statement. They call the card issuer and they say, hey, I didn't make that transaction. You know, I want you to take that off my statement. And the card issuer removes that transaction, and the card issuer takes the loss. That's what happens today. In October of this year, that liability will shift to you unless you take some steps to ensure that it doesn't. The good news is we're really here to coach you on a few steps that Visa wants you to take, and if you take those steps, you won't be liable for transactions or fraud transactions, and at the same time, you'll help to mitigate the number of fraud transactions that are happening out there today. So as you can see from this slide, we're way behind the rest of the world in accepting chip cards. Visa Europe is at 93% of all transactions done through chip, and even SEMA, Central Europe, Middle East, and Africa is 87% of transactions are already done through chip in those areas. In America, Visa's been wanting the change to happen for a while, but they needed to pull a lever to make it happen. And here's really, the issue is this. The card issuer said, why should we spend more money to add these chips to our credit cards when the merchants or the dealerships don't even have chip-enabled terminals or point-of-sale systems, because it's more costly to us. And the merchants and dealerships said the same thing. Why should we invest in chip terminals and chip point-of-sales when most of the cards don't even have a chip in them? And so there was a stalemate. And so, again, Visa had to make or pull a lever to make that industry change happen. I was in a meeting earlier this year and got a chance to ask a senior leader with Visa this question. And the question I had was, who is the third party, independent, let's just call it the referee, who's going to make the determination when there is a fraud transaction? Is it the card issuer who's going to be liable for that particular transaction, or is it going to be the merchant? Who's that third party person making the call? And the answer was, it's the card issuer. And I said, well, wait, hold on, that can't be right. How is it that the card issuer is going to get to make the determination of who's liable between them and the merchant? And what keeps that card issuer from just saying every fraud transaction is on the merchant? And the answer was, there's nothing that keeps them from doing that. They can do that. And so here's the bottom line. I don't want to see any of you subjected to the additional significant costs that are going to be associated with fraud liability. In Canada, where this rolled out a few years back, only 34% of businesses were ready and it costs many of them significant money. And again, I don't see that happen to anyone on this call. Here's the good news. EMV is much more secure and has been very effective stopping fraud. It uses a chip inside the card, which is very hard to duplicate, and it's reduced counterfeit card fraud by 84% in other countries where it's already rolled out. We do believe this is going to shift the focus of the fraudsters to non-card present forms of payment, such as e-commerce, but it will decrease card present fraud significantly. This is going to be a very positive thing for everyone involved in accepting and in processing payments for the entire industry. So here's some of the other good news. You don't have to be subjected to these fraud losses. It's very easy, but it does require a change on your part. If you'll invest in EMV chip terminals or point-of-sale systems at your dealership and run each of the chip cards presented as a chip transaction, even if there is fraud on that transaction, you won't be liable in the same way that you're not liable for counterfeit card fraud today. So let's take it one step deeper, and let's look at how this is going to work. Let's say you've done the right thing, you've upgraded to a chip terminal, it's past October. Does this mean you can't accept a card that only has a magnetic stripe, it doesn't have the chip embedded? Not at all. You can still accept the old magnetic stripe cards, and you're not going to be liable. If you did the right thing and you updated your terminal to EMV chip-enabled, even if you're swiping a magnetic stripe, you won't be liable. However, if you have a chip terminal and a chip card is presented and you swipe that card instead of using it as a chip transaction, you will be liable for that fraud if it's a fraudulent transaction. So it's so important that you train your cashiers, whoever's running that point of sale, to make sure every time a chip card is presented that it's done in the fashion that chip should be done, which we'll see how that looks in just a minute. So chip cards are coming. As you can see, worldwide there's over 2.4 billion chip cards issued. However, in America, we only have 48 million chip cards issued as of now. That number is going to grow to over 500 million by the end of this year in America. The cards are coming. So here's also another thing that we noticed from the polling. It's an interesting phenomenon that I want to make you aware of. When they looked at the polling from Canadian consumers after the fraud liability shift, after the shift to chip technology, we got feedback in the polling that said consumers that walked into businesses that did not have new chip technology were far less likely to return to that store. And the feedback that we got was they didn't feel that if that business was not willing to upgrade to chip technology, they didn't feel that their information security was being taken seriously. And so they were less likely to return to that store, is what the polling said. I want to make you aware of that and make sure it's not a concern for your dealership. So Visa calls it the dip. That's not my term, that's Visa's term, but they call it the dip instead of the swipe. You dip the chip card into the bottom of the terminal and leave it all the way in there until it beeps. This does take a little bit longer than you would expect. The terminal will tell you if the customer should put in a PIN or if it just prints for signature. If there's a signature line on the printout, you should get their signature. It's not you that's going to determine if that chip card needs to put in the PIN. The card issuer for each specific card that's going to embed within their chip sort of their rules around whether it should be chip and PIN or chip and signature. Also, PIN is no longer for debit. Many times credit cards now with chip are gonna require a PIN. And so PIN, again, is not just for debit going forward. It'll be for credit cards as well, too, in some cases. I know it's going to take some getting used to, but soon it'll become second nature. But I'll give you an example of where it's so important that you're familiar with this technology and how it's going to work. Let's say a consumer comes to your business. You've got the chip technology, the chip terminal. They pull out the chip card, and when you put it in, you dip it into the slot, it says put in the PIN. And the customer says, gosh, I've forgotten my PIN. Can you just swipe my card? Well, you could do that, and it would probably work. The transaction would go through. But if you do that, you're now potentially liable if that's a fraudulent transaction. So you should ask that customer to provide a form of payment. If they don't have their PIN, you should not swipe it or you put yourself at risk. So let's take a look at some other technologies that are coming out. There's many variations of chip technology that are coming every day. Apple Pay, Google Wallet, smartwatches, they're all coming. They're essentially chip cards, but with a phone or watch surrounding the chip instead of the plastic card. So since the phone or watch is not going to fit into the slot, they have what's called near-field communication, which transmits the chip information to the terminal as long as the device is very close to the terminal. So if someone comes up to your terminal, they start tapping or banging their phone on your terminal or waving it around a whole bunch, now you know what they're doing. They've got the chip embedded within that watch, within the smartphone, and they're using that through near-field communication. So we want to help you. We've worked with AIADA to deeply discount our EMV terminals and point-of-sale systems to make it even easier for you to be ready for liability shift. We're so proud to have partnered with AIADA and to provide these deep discounts on terminals as well as reduced fees. So with TransArmor, with the PCI compliance that was talked about earlier, monitoring as well as reduced pricing, we believe we're well positioned to help you navigate the new era of payment processing in a really confident way. We hope you'll be ready prior to the October 1st liability shift. We want you to give your dealer services RM a call. We're typically local in your market, and we'll get started right away and help you be ready for these changes and evaluate the specific needs of your business. Now, I might be just a little bit biased here, but I think our dealer services team is the best in the industry. And if you've got a business need in any area, not just payment processing, we probably have a solution for that business need. And so if you don't know your relationship manager, or if for some reason you don't have their contact information, here's a list of the regional directors. Take a look at whatever state you're in and go ahead and write down the name and number for your regional director. And go ahead and give them a call today, and we'll go ahead and get started for you. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I hope this has been valuable information for you. Best wishes on a great year for you and your business. And now I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that you may have.
So we've got one question that's come in here. The question is the EMV liability shift a legal requirement? And the answer is that no, it is not currently a mandate. It's just a liability shift happening October 1st of this year. So you'll still be able to accept payments with non-EMV or chip and PIN, chip and signature enabled equipment. However, we are encouraging you to accept this type of transaction and upgrade your equipment because it does improve security for your business and for your customers. Another question just came in. Can we download and print the slideshow for reference? I believe that the slideshow is going to be made available to everybody that's been on the call. Dan, if you can confirm that, that would be great.
Yes, that's correct, Lily. Everybody will get this presentation that registered.
Another question is roughly are the EMV fees with the DIP any different compared to the swipe? Today, they're not any different. The card networks, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover have, I think, close to 1,000 different interchange rates out there today. There are not different interchange rates for EMV transactions versus a regular magnetic swipe transaction. However, I would not be surprised if in the future the card networks changed that and created updated rates that may even be a little bit lower than a swipe because of the increased security in the chip. I will say to that point also, as Ben mentioned earlier, if you're processing a chip and PIN transaction and your terminal requests a PIN, that does not qualify as a PIN-based debit transaction. That still qualifies as a signature credit card type of transaction, even though you're inputting a PIN. Another question I just got is, what if my customers don't present EMV cards for payment? And I think Ben went over this a little bit earlier. We do anticipate that more and more customers will be using EMV cards by the end of the year, since the issuing banks are starting to distribute these. I don't know, I'm assuming a lot of you on the phone, especially those that travel internationally, probably already have chip-enabled cards, but you can still process a transaction that does not have a chip in it, and you can swipe it.
Hey, Lily, there's another question here. It says, will there be a sufficient number of these terminals to distribute to businesses by October 1st? I can tell you that Wells Fargo, I can't speak for everybody, but Wells Fargo has been working on ramping this up for almost a year and a half now. So we are fully prepared for it. So if you give us a call, we'll be ready.
And we just got a wonderful compliment here on the online room saying that they just signed up with Wells Fargo Merchant Services a couple of months ago. The process was seamless and the support was great. So thank you. We appreciate that feedback, and we look forward to working with everybody else on the line to bring you up to this EMV liability shift.
Great. Any more questions? Ben, Lily?
Yeah, Dan, there's just one last one, and we'll wrap it up after that. But there's a question that says, who is liable if the customer does not have a chip card, but we are EMV compliant? And it's a great question. You are not liable if you did the right thing and you became EMV enabled in the terminal or point of sale system that you have, even if they don't have a chip credit card, the customer comes in. So great question.
Well, great, you guys. Again, thank you so very, very much to Ben and Lily. This was outstanding information. It's something I certainly wasn't that familiar with until I got my new Visa card with the chip in it just the other week. And really, really appreciate your time today, both of you. Thank you so very, very much. Again, we'll be sending out a copy of this to everybody that registered. You'll get all the contact information, all the full deck for your review. If you want to share it in-house with your other managers, please feel free to do so. Please mark your calendars now for July 21st. We're going to have something that complements this program, data compromise, cyber liability. That'll be coming July 21st. Again at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, repeating it again at 4 p.m. And that'll be put on by Federated Insurance. They do this seminar for NADA Academy as well. On August the 18th, we're going to have take a bit of a different twist, really a great topic, understanding your manufacturer's sales performance measurement. Important factors of which you might not be aware. And having worked for the factory at one point in my career, I know how important it was in reviewing those monthly reports. And there were times where the numbers none of us really understood where those numbers came from. So this should be an excellent opportunity to dig into the numbers. Again, that'll be August the 18th at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have anybody that you feel would benefit from today's program, please have them join us for the 4 p.m. session. Again, we're going to repeat this with Ben and Lily. They've agreed to be back on with us, and we're going to repeat it. So feel free to have as many folks as you feel would benefit and have them register, and we'd love to have them on the afternoon session. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining, and we'll talk to you soon. Look forward to seeing you on July 21st. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.